In the arid West, water is key to the survival of everything. That's why early-day pioneers staked out river bottoms when they settled the West. It was all about water. In recent years, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been partnering with ranchers in Owyhee County to create more ponds and wetlands on private lands.
Initially, the project was focused about Columbia spotted frogs, which is a candidate species, but it kind of broadened out from that. This was really a situation where so many other species would benefit besides just the Columbia spotted frog that we wanted to make it about suites of species rather than one specific species. Already we're standing here and we've got red-winged blackbirds and the cattails here. We have a Pacific chorus frog croaking at us earlier, so things are already starting to move in and use these wetlands.
The Fish and Wildlife Service wants to create more habitat for birds and wildlife. But Tom Biebighauser, who came to Owyhee County to teach a wetlands workshop, said the projects can have a dual purpose.
The message he gave us was we can do both. You know, we can create some wildlife-friendly improvements on your property, and at the same time making an improvement for your operation.
Owyhee County rancher Chris Black dug a series of ponds in 2 different locations to create meadow habitat for wildlife and cattle.
Well, I wanted to create the meadow habitat because water is so scarce in the West, and water is critical to life. So if I can create a meadow habitat, I can create a place for sage grouse to come in, pronghorn to come in, all wildlife to use, plus my cows have a habitat that they can use. So it's good for everything in the system.
During Tom Biebighauser's workshop, they dug a new wetlands pond on John and Kathy Romero's ranch. Through the Fish and Wildlife Service's Partners in Fish and Wildlife program, 50% cost share funds are available to assist with the cost of pond construction.
The help from the Fish and Wildlife Service, that cost share, particularly any rancher or farmer that's interested, it makes it an attractive feature.
Biebighauser says a shallow pond design is important for wildlife habitat.
He says the way to do it to promote more wildlife is you get away from the cereal bowl and you construct more of the satellite dish, so something with more gently sloping edges, and that promotes the vegetation coming in on the edges, and it provides more hiding cover or nesting cover for animals. And plus you have the open water, so things like bats that like to drink water off the wing, they have access to water that way.
Chris Black agrees.
It becomes important to have different types of habitat throughout here. We need to have shallow water and we need to have deep water for frogs so that the shallow water is where they breed, the deep water is where they go to escape. The shallow water is where most of the insects and stuff thrive.
Rancher Jerry Hoagland has dug many ponds in Upper Reynolds Creek for spotted frogs in partnership with the Fish and Wildlife Service.
We dug 20 ponds and to their design, and then we've been monitoring them for the last 3 years, and the population is gradually growing. We counted over 120 juveniles, and I don't know how many adults in that pond. That was absolutely amazing. So that was, yeah, that's wow. We're finding lots more frogs, and it will probably help keep it off the list.
During the wetlands workshop, Hoagland made some more land available on his Dry Creek Ranch for a pond. Art Telsma of the Nature Conservancy thinks the Hoagland Pond will create valuable habitat for wildlife and livestock.
Reynolds Creek is kind of famous. Its watershed has been well studied, but there aren't very many ponded places right here in this stretch of land. And the first species that I think of as benefiting, and that's sage grouse. We have a sage grouse lek on the top of the mountain right in the distance. We have then sage habitat in the background, so that would be where they nest. But where they raise their broods are next to these wet meadows and small wetlands. Of course, waterfowl love to come into this. I'd like to say a little bit about waterfowl. Waterfowl in the Owyees, it's extremely important on an arid landscape They're migrating through, and that's the most important value for the migrating waterfall, is to have a high energy source of food, and that's what shallow wetlands give to you. Thousands of ducks sometimes land in that, feed intensively, then they're headed on up to Canada.
We are in tune with the wildlife scene, and we do like wildlife around us. On our place here, we have sandhill cranes, we have lots of waterfowl, we've got a lot of pheasants, quail, ground squirrels, badgers, coyotes. We don't have any wolves yet on our place. But yeah, a variety of, Canadian geese, and then a variety of songbirds and things like that.
Chris Black has created pond habitat for wildlife and as a place for his cattle to drink. But his overall objective has been to create wet meadow habitat for multiple species.
I'll try to manage holistically, which means I try to consider everything when I manage. I'm managing for wildlife, I'm managing for recreation, I'm managing for all the things that are out there.
Black set up his ponds to sub-irrigate the meadows.
I wanted them to leak. I wanted them to recharge the system. In the early spring, when we have runoff in this particular area, we have 3 to 5 days of heavy runoff, an immense amount of water coming down. But then we don't have any water. My idea was to hold that water in the system longer so that it can build these meadows and it can recharge the aquifer instead of just running off.
Black brings his cattle into the Camas Creek meadows in the spring when the meadows are full of water.
Enables me to use pastures more effectively, enables me to time my use a lot more effectively because I can come into different pastures if they have water in them and use them for a short time period and move on to another one.
In Toy Valley, Black grazes his cattle here in the fall, after it has been rested all summer.
But as you can see, everything's at seed ripe and hit its biological potential here, as you can see by the grass.
All of the ranchers who have worked on enhancing wetlands recommend it for other landowners. A key aspect is that it's much quicker and easier to make conservation improvements on private lands.
Especially here in Owyhee County, water is the key thing. In the West, and particularly here in the drier parts of the West, that those real valuable lands, valuable for livestock and wildlife, are on the private ground. And so to make improvements for wildlife, I think a lot of people are discovering that if we can help the private landowners out, then we can also help wildlife.
Indeed, a recent public opinion poll conducted by the University of Idaho for the Idaho Rangeland Resource Commission found that 84% of the public recognizes that private ranch lands provide important wildlife habitat. On a scale of 1 to 7, 68% rated the value of private farms and ranches for wildlife as being a 5 or higher.
The more habitat we can create, the better off we all are in the long run. The more habitat for wildlife, the more profit you can make for cattle. If you can enhance a meadow like this, make it grow, or have a clean drink of water for your cow. Yes, I would recommend it for other ranchers.
I think it's positive for everybody.